Let's get to our 5 headlines. Let me pull up our news headlines if I can find them. Here they are. Okay, of course, the big news, I'm told, supposedly, is President Donald Trump telling Bob Woodward in March that he wants to play down the coronavirus. This is all going to appear in Woodward's forthcoming book, Rage, about the Trump administration. I wonder if it's going to have a positive or negative spin. I don't know. It's hard to tell. You can never tell. Who knows? Impossible to predict. This conversation between Trump and Woodward is on tape. You've probably heard the tape by now, but if not, here it is again.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. People don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
So
what's going on
give me a moment of talking to somebody, going through this with Fauci or somebody who kind of, it caused a pivot in your mind, because it's clear just from what's on the public record that you went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Okay, there you go. And he also said, Trump said at other times early in February, that the virus is deadly stuff and worse than the flu. And the claim from Trump's critics is that these private statements contradict what he said publicly and show that he lied to the public. There's a lot more in these interviews. He did 18 interviews with Woodward, 18. Many of them apparently recorded, 18 interviews. Here's what I'll say about this. First of all, he did say in those comments just played that he was playing it down, quote unquote, in order to prevent the public from panicking. Now, I don't think preventing a panic is a good reason for a public official to lie. If you're going to accept that excuse from the government for lying, then you can't ever criticize the government for lying, because that's always the excuse for lying from the government. But on the other hand, I don't think that Trump actually was lying necessarily. I think that what you heard there was more a reflection of Trump's limited vocabulary than anything else. He said play it down, but in the context, it seemed like he really meant to say something like allay fears or something like that. That probably would have caught his meaning a little bit better, I think. And besides, his public comments were also all over the place. So if his private comments were all over the place and his public comments were all over the place, there are a lot of criticisms you can make towards him about that, but I don't think you can accuse him of deception or conspiracy or a cover-up or something like that. It sounds like the guy was sort of flailing, which is certainly the impression he gave publicly as well as privately. So I think all in all, this is not a huge scandal. It's not the huge scandal the left wants it to be. It doesn't reflect well on Trump either, but it's not a breathtaking scandal, which is, of course, what they are hoping for. Now, that said, my real issue here is that Trump decided to do 18 recorded interviews with a guy who was writing an expose about him, which would come out before the election. That is inexcusably stupid. And it shows what I've always said, which is that Trump is not media savvy at all. He gets credit for he's a master at media manipulation. No, he just does and says stuff randomly, and the media is so incompetent that it often works out in Trump's favor. But a media savvy president would not do recorded interviews 18 times with a guy who is clearly against you and wants to write a hit piece on you. If Trump actually thought there was any chance that Bob Woodward would write a positive book about him, then that's the dumbest thing of all. There is just no scenario where that works in your favor. The best you can hope for. I know that the people defending Trump are saying, oh, this isn't going to hurt him. Okay, well, that's the best you can hope for. You sit down for 18 recorded interviews with Bob Woodward. Best possible outcome is that it's neutral. It doesn't hurt you. In which case, it was a waste of time. Worst outcome is that it does hurt you. There is no universe at all in which it helps you, in which prattling to Bob Woodward 18 times with recordings somehow works in your favor. It's not going to. So there's no reason to do it. Why did Trump do it then? Well, because Trump is incapable of saying no to someone who wants to give him attention. It really is that simple, and that's one of his great weaknesses, I think. Okay, number 2. From the Daily Wire, it says, Attorney General William Barr announced Wednesday that Operation Legend, a Department of Justice program designed to supplement major city police departments with federal agents and resources amid an unprecedented national crime wave, has cut the Chicago murder rate roughly in half since launch and has reversed a surge of violence that was leaving dozens killed. It says, looking for the actual numbers here about Chicago, the results of those actions speak for themselves. Over the past 5 weeks of Operation Legend in Chicago, murders dropped by 50% over the previous 5 weeks. August ultimately saw a 45% decrease in murders compared to July and a 35% decrease compared to June. Okay. So if I'm interpreting the data here correctly, it would seem that the takeaway is that enforcing the law helps reduce crime. Yes, when you allow criminals to commit crime without consequence, you get more crime. When you impose a consequence, you get less crime. There would seem to be a cause and effect relationship here, possibly. And this is why I've been saying for a long time that all of this talk about criminal justice reform is focused on reforming in exactly the wrong way. There is not a crisis in our country of innocent people being sent to jail or criminals being given sentences that are too harsh. That's not, now, that kind of thing does happen on occasion, but that's not the systemic issue. The systemic issue is that violent, dangerous people are filtered quickly through the system and then sent back out onto the streets. That's the systemic problem. The systemic issue is that many people, many of the people out in the street committing crime are known to the system to be criminals and to be dangerous, and yet they're allowed to remain free. Great example of this, okay? Just from this week as well in New York. A guy named Daniel Biggs, you can see the video here. He rode his bike past a 60-year-old woman, punched her in the head, and knocked her to the ground and just kept on riding. Now, fortunately, a bunch of firefighters saw this happen and were able to chase him down and apprehend him, which is good. But Biggs is 53 years old, apparently, has 18 prior arrests for robbery, assault, and other crimes. Now he's out randomly assaulting women who are just walking down the street. This is a man with nothing to offer society. Just violence and crime. That's all he's got to offer. That's all he's got to give. There is just no reason to have him out on the street. There's no reforming somebody like this. Someone who's been a scumbag their entire life and now at the age of 53 is still out randomly assaulting people just for fun. There's no reforming. There's no real hope that one day this will be a productive member of society. This is someone who you throw into a cage and you keep them there forever. Okay, you say to that person, you're done. You've had your chance. You've had many chances. You clearly don't want to behave like a human being. You're not interested in that. So this is what you get. We're going to throw you in a cage. But what happened to Biggs, though? Well, he was charged a few days later and released on bail. They released him. 18 arrests. He's doing that. They release him out on bail. What do you think? Is Biggs going to show up diligently for his court appearance? Is he going to wear a nice suit, come to the court on the day that's assigned and, face the consequences like a man? No, of course not. So this is the way it works. Guys like this filter through the system and they end up back on the street, commit more crimes. The system is way, way, way too lenient, not too harsh. And that's where the reform should be focused. So it's good that, at least on the federal level, we're starting to see some of that. Okay. A man named Safwan Chowdhury posted video yesterday that he says shows him and his family being kicked off a WestJet flight. In fact, the whole flight was canceled, as a matter of fact, because his 19-month-old child was not wearing a mask. You can't see or hear much in the video, but I'll play it for you anyway. Here it is.
It is bullshit. Bullshit. Okay. Bullshit. Dog. We've all seen it.
Listen to
We
me.
have all seen it.
This isn't going to get finished with you sat in this chair. You need to offload off the plane.
You goofy cop.
Continue with that
Beat it.
Excuse me.
Your issue.
What is your? What
Your
is
issue.
your?
This is not mine.
Everyone has seen it.
Please listen to me.
No, his partner. Everyone has seen it.
There is a law.
Where were you riding a bicycle at this time?
You don't be ignorant.
Goof.
You don't be ignorant.
On the mask to your child when you were asked several times. How do you know that you weren't here? I got witnesses.
We all have seen it.
Look at your own eyes.
Now, WestJet, in defense of itself, says that no, the problem was not the 19-month-old, it was the 3-year-old daughter was not wearing a mask. So they canceled the flight because of that. Chowdhury disputes that claim, and so there's a he said thing going on. Here's how it shakes out as far as I can tell. Number one, expecting a baby, a 19-month-old, to wear a mask is madness and dangerous. Babies can suffocate very easily. You don't put any kind of fabric or anything around the face of a baby, period. Any business that requires that should be sued. Any parent who complies with that is stupid and gutless beyond words. Absolutely, you don't put a mask on a baby, you lunatics. But what if it was just the 3-year-old that was the issue? Well, guess what? Still stupid. Just as stupid. Many 3-year-olds aren't going to cooperate with having a mask on and shouldn't be required to. And it doesn't seem very healthy to me to have a 3-year-old who's panicking because they don't understand why they have to have this thing on their face, restricting their breathing. And now they're trying to breathe hard, they're panicking, they're screaming, they got the mask on. No, I have a 3-year-old myself. He's not going to wear a mask for any long period of time. He'll put one on for like 45 seconds, mainly just because he sees everyone else doing it. But then it's going to come off, and I'm not going to force him to wear it. I've said many times that as far as I'm concerned, if a business wants me to wear a mask, I will respect their property rights and comply with that, even though I don't like it. But no, you're not going to force me to put a mask on my 3-year-old. It's just not going to happen. But here's the thing that really gets to me about this. Going back to that video, okay? You heard the child crying, obviously scared, confused. So when you think about that, requiring little kids to put masks on, or, the latest now, they're going to be canceling trick or treat. I think Chicago said they're probably going to cancel it. Even though you're outside, the kids are already wearing masks and costumes, so there's no reason to do it, but they're going to do it anyway. Or any of the other millions of examples of the ways that kids have been affected by this. What gets me is that none of this is about protecting the kids themselves. Okay, this is not some sort of misguided but well-meaning attempt to protect children. I personally have a lot of sympathy for misguided but well-meaning attempts to protect children. I sympathize with that because I get it. I understand as a father, I understand how sometimes you could go a little overboard in your zealousness to protect children. I can certainly be guilty of that sometimes. I mean, you should see the way that I cut up food for my 3-year-old. It's as if he's an infant. Cut it up into these little tiny, like microscopic bits because I'm terrified that he'll choke. And it's way overboard. My wife makes fun of me, but I can't help it. It's my greatest fear is a kid choking. So I go way overboard sometimes too to protect them in certain areas. But that's not what this is about with the coronavirus. No, this is about selfish and scared adults trying to protect themselves from the kids. Insisting that a baby wear a mask, and I'm counting a 3-year-old as a baby in this context, insisting that a baby wear a mask, no matter how scared and confused and terrified he is, or how unhealthy it is for him, in order so that you can be protected from him, is the height of cowardice and selfishness. I mean, even leaving aside the fact that the kid's not going to spread coronavirus to you. Kids, this has been established many times over. Kids are very unlikely to contract it and spread it. But even aside from that, we're doing all of this to kids to protect ourselves because we're afraid. These aren't things we're doing for them. It's things we're forcing them to do for us, which is exactly backwards. Number 4, I canceled gender reveal parties on the show earlier this week. You may remember The Daily Show with Trevor Noah is behind the times. They came in and canceled them too. But frankly, I thought my cancellation was way better than this. Watch.
But guys, this has to stop, right? Or at least if you insist on a gender reveal, you should do something that helps the situation. The water's pink, it's a girl! And aside from all the damage it can cause, celebrating a baby's genitalia is starting to feel very outdated. Like, given everything we're learning about gender reveal parties should only happen when the child is old enough to know their actual gender and to pitch in some cash for the fire damage. And honestly, I don't even know why we need gender reveal parties. You know what we do need, though? Race reveal parties.
Trevor Noah really has the charisma and comedic chops of like a pillowcase filled with wet sand. And I've never heard the guy tell a funny joke. Have you? If anyone is aware of a funny Trevor Noah moment from any point in his career, pre-Daily Show or during the Daily Show, let me know, because I've never seen it, and I've looked. And the thing is, there was a time long ago when the Daily Show might have done that exact same segment with the same lines and everything, and it would have been funny because the bit at the end about choosing gender would have been satirical. It would have been a joke. 10 years ago, that bit would have been satire. And today, it is something that is delivered in earnestness and sincerity. By the way, Trevor, you say everything we've learned about gender is, what is that exactly? What have we learned? What exactly have we learned scientifically proving that gender can be chosen rather than it being something you're born with? I'd really like to know. You said we've learned. Okay, we've learned a lot, everything we've learned. Give me like one thing we've learned that justifies what you just said. Well, he can't. He can't, they never can. Hey, you, you right there. Hit the subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It's somewhat appreciated.